Hello, everybody. It is Friday again, and we are here to have lunch and to learn. The Versus Virus Incubator has a very interesting guest today. It is somebody who you have asked us to invite for a long time. It is Luke Szkudlarek. No, Szkudlarek. He's from What? And he is a growth hacking specialist. He helps his clients create amazing online selling strategies and grow their businesses. So today, he's going to help the Versus Virus participants with go-to-market strategies. Welcome, Luke. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Thanks for the introduction.
You're very welcome. And I propose you take it from here.
Cool, that's great. Thanks, Biljana. So welcome everyone. As Biljana said, today we'll talk about go-to-market strategies. I would like to reserve enough time for your questions. Therefore, my presentation will be relatively short. So we should be done with the slides in 10, 15 minutes. In my daily job, we support companies with campaign consulting and execution of campaigns at different stages, from very early product validation stage to growth campaigns acquiring thousands of customers globally. And although we do have some frameworks to kind of develop a strategy that fit the lean startup method, there is certainly no one magic formula to achieve growth or launch the product. So if you were hoping for like a ready-made strategy today, then I'll have to disappoint you because I won't be able to share one. But I wanted to look at some of the most common challenges that you probably will be facing with your product. And I think that would be a good place. That would be a good place to start. So we move on to common pitfalls. I don't know if you can see I guess you can see the slide, so that works. So what are the most common pitfalls? I mean, we are approached by really startups from super early stage when they just have an idea to MVP, and also with sometimes failing products. So they maybe launched a product and they didn't work as well, or maybe they validated and now want to grow further. So this is kind of based on the last 10 years of experience. I think all of you probably will have some of those challenges. And if you look for help at some point, or you want to do it yourself, I would just want to focus today on those 4 points. So we'll go through them one by one. And the first one will be, we'll look at the difference between validation campaign and actually marketing launch strategy and go-to-market strategy, because that's sometimes confused. Secondly, we'll talk about the role of the marketing briefing. Briefing is kind of the most important document in marketing, and I'll explain why. Then we'll look at digital analytics, and finally, choosing right tools, like what channels, what tools we use and when. So that's kind of the plan for today. So we'll start with the first one. So go-to-market versus validation campaign. And so how do we define go-to-market strategy? And I think one of my colleagues and partners are what Markus Kuhn talked to you a month ago about MVP, development process. So as part of this process, you define the product. And what's even more important to marketing, we define your initial hypothesis. So you make assumptions about, I think this feature will be cool, they will love it. So it's important that we approach a validation campaign differently to the market launch campaign, because there's a lot of confusion about this. And I think we need to understand kind of what the difference is. So the validation campaign, or the way we understand validation campaign, the goal of the campaign is to validate your hypothesis, look at your assumptions, and learn as much as you can. And it also means that you're still tinkering with the product, your message, and your audiences. So you don't know yet at that stage what the USPs are. And also you don't probably know even who the customer is. So with the validation campaign, we, for example, don't focus as much on a CPA. Like, we don't care how much the campaign costs. So we look at mostly, I mean, why do we campaign? We want to validate the hypothesis, and we want to learn as much as possible. So you pay to learn. You don't pay to win customers, you pay to learn. I think that's really important. So I think if you pass that stage and you're ready with the product, then you can actually, you know what your CPA is through those learnings. Then I think you're ready to think about kind of larger market launch. And I think that's how we at least see this. And then your product is probably also quite ready to go to market. So yeah, go on.
Quick, thank you. What is CPA? Can you please explain to us?
Sure, sorry, I promised not to use the jargon. So CPA is cost per acquisition. So it's how much you pay to acquire one customer. It's just one of the most common metrics to measure success. But it could be also CPL, it could be cost per lead if you're acquiring leads. It could also be cost per recurring customer and so on. But I think the metric needs to be defined. But in the validation process, you normally know what you're trying to test, what you're trying to validate, and then you choose KPIs or goals according to that goal. So if you want to say, I think the landing page is cool, I want people to sign up for a demo of my product, then of course you will be interested in how often people who visit the page sign up for a demo, and then maybe you segment between 2-3 different audiences or different campaigns, for example, and then you measure cost per sign up for a demo. And then you can say, okay, this audience works better than audience A, works better than audience B. So I think that's important, because I feel that probably in the incubator, we're dealing more with validation campaigns than a true go-to-market campaign. So I think I actually wrote a blog about it, and I think I linked it later in the presentation. You can also read it, and I think that's where I say, how do you plan such a campaign? And in terms of market launch, I think this means you already validated your product, you run enough tests, and you know where the potential customers are, and you're looking to acquire larger volumes of customers. So now you're ready to really push it, and you know your numbers. So okay, that's how much we pay for Facebook, that's how much we pay for Google, and now we want to scale. And I think that's how we kind of think about it, because there are different expectations and also approaches depending on the stage. And I think it's important that you also realize, okay, I'm in this stage, and this is, therefore, let's say in the validation process, you really don't care about the CPA. And I think that sometimes it's important, because people may be obsessed too much about how much money they spend in the validation, but in the validation, they should spend enough money to actually validate the product and learn. Because if you skip that process and then you start talking about market launch without proper validation, it means it will cost you 20 times more later, because you will be trying to sell the wrong product to the wrong audience. And maybe you need to even go back to your engineers in the end to fix the product. So I think that's really costly mistake that I would rather avoid. So I think that reality check about your stage, I think it's important. And of course, when the validation goes well, you make some adjustments to the product, to your marketing, to your message, to the audience. It's a really smooth transition to the market launch, because then you really learn. And then typically it's also aligns with your financing. because if you think about investors also, they want product that is validated. They're not going to put a lot of money on that product that is not validated. So as soon as you can prove that it's validated, and often this is also our role as an agency, founders come to us and we help them validate the product because they want more financing. And it's a big value in doing this well, because it's a much better conversation with an investor if you can tell them, we run this validation campaign, it was properly structured, properly measured, and now we believe that there is a huge market for it, and now we want to go to market. And I think that's often the crucial point for each early stage company, and that's why I think this part is really important. So I hope that makes sense, and I think we can move on to the next one. Okay, so a limited marketing briefing. I mean, generally, marketing, I think marketing, everyone knows this, but I will just quickly summarize. Marketing briefing is a document that defines campaign parameters. And in my experience, it's also a process of structuring and professionally approaching growth strategies. And often the problem is we don't get a brief at all. So founders will call us and they'll say, I want a campaign, or I want some marketing because we're very bad at marketing. I need some marketing. And I think this is the worst case scenario, because then you have to kind of develop the brief for the customer. So I strongly believe that this is the role and the job of the founders and the staff to come up with at least a basic marketing briefing and actually invest some time. So what does it mean? I mean, we all have brilliant marketing ideas and they sometimes come unexpected, but investing that time in this process is really important. So I really recommend to define in the briefing process, define your goals, your KPIs, key messages, USPs, write about the product, what problems does it solve, look at maybe previous lessons from marketing, from those validation campaigns, define competitors and what they're good at, how you position against competitors, maybe also write about hypotheses, audiences, and also maybe give us, or whoever you work with, or even if you do it internally, write down your brain, like creative ideas. Maybe there are a few ideas that then can be further developed. So everything that is required for someone to pick it up and actually understand, okay, that's the kind of like a brain dump of your marketing strategy, your requirements. So I think that really, really helps, whether you do it with an agency or yourself. And I think a few words also about personas, because I see a lot of startups coming to us and they invest incredible amount of time in personas, to define personas and write, like they say, okay, Sylvia is 15 and goes to school and has this problem and so on. And normally those personas take a lot of time to define, and we invalidate them very, very quickly. So I would actually focus, because the way Facebook or Google advertising or any kind of programmatic advertising works, the algorithm decides who the audience is. We don't define that. I mean, we can have some assumptions about who the customers are, but in the end, we go on the programmatic advertising market and we let the algorithms to find personas. And I think I even wrote a blog about this, because I know a lot of agencies really go through this process. They give us personas beautifully defined, and next day we tell them that the audience is actually completely different. And it's not, in 99% of cases, it's different than what we thought it was. So I would really not obsess too much about personas. I would really think about the things that I said earlier, and also the kind of, just to summarize the briefing part, during the briefing process, you were also likely to stumble upon new ways of thinking about your marketing challenge. So this is really valuable. So even if you have zero knowledge about marketing, just prepare a solid brief, and it will help you collect your thoughts, your previous learnings. And what's more important, it will help you collaborate with others and delegate tasks. So especially if you don't want to do it yourself, then such a briefing really allows your partners to come up with a good strategy and understand your place. All right, so we can move on to the next one, reliable tracking and data. So that's also incredibly important. And we're talking here about more than just standard Google Analytics implementation. Because often we say, okay, yeah, we have that covered because we put the Google Analytics pixel on the website. And it's more than that. So we really want to understand the KPIs and create reports that show us the data that helps us at this stage. And this is also a moving target because you will need a different data if you just have one landing page and you're validating your USPs, for example, than if you run 5 channels and you spend a lot of money. So please also think about it. And I would say 80% of people who come to us, and these are also sometimes established startups with marketing teams, 80% get this wrong. I mean, there's always missing tracking, incorrectly set up pixels, no dashboard, no configuration basically, or mistakes in configuration. So this is something that is really important for you, for your investors, for growth. And I think without that, it would be very, very difficult to even run a proper validation campaign or go to market. And I think the tools that I recommend to really master is, of course, Google Analytics is kind of almost, I think, overused in a way, because you can, for me, Google Analytics is just a good place to collect your information, to centralize your data. But you really need to work with Google Tag Manager to ensure that tracking is set up correctly and you track the right events, the right goals. Then you need to understand pixels. So if you use Facebook or LinkedIn advertising, make sure you have your pixels installed so that these systems can also feed or benefit from the data from the website. So imagine Facebook, if you run advertising on Facebook, Facebook needs to know what a successful visit looks like. And the better data you deliver to Facebook, better Facebook will be able to use their algorithm to find similar people for your product. So that's incredibly important. And I would also recommend using Data Studio. So Data Studio is a package from Google, it's free, connects to Google Analytics, connects to Google Sheets, and also it has integrations with many tools. It allows you to visualize the data, because a lot of people have allergy to data. They're really scared, afraid of numbers and tracking. And I think if you're a marketing person or you want to show something to your investors, there's nothing better than an easy dashboard. I mean, and I'm not talking about building complex reports. I think you only probably need 1 or 2 charts with the key information at the beginning, but it really helps to get a view at a glance how you're doing. So this is also, I see, as an essential component for any kind of go-to-market strategy. And I think we can move on to the last kind of pitfall or challenge. And I think it's it's like it's about choosing the right tools for the right challenge. I mean, and I think often we also have founders. They say, okay, I want now a Facebook campaign, or I want to start investing. And actually, maybe they're not in the right stage, and we have to look at the overall strategy. So before we go to the Q&A, I won't bore you here with a list of various channels and strategies that are possible, but we'll just quickly talk about selecting the tools. So the way I think about it, or the one way to consider your stage, is if you're running a validation campaign, so the setup will be different, Or when you listen to kind of Marcus's presentation, he probably talked about test customers. So acquiring your test customers will be also a slightly different strategy. Maybe in the validation and test customers, you will be relying more on your relationships and your network. But then we go to acquiring first 100, 1,000 or 10,000 customers. So I think, or even maybe later further beyond that. So then you have to really adjust your channels and keep it really simple. So the lower the number is, the simpler your campaign should be. So we have customers, for example, that maxed on the number of customers they can acquire in Switzerland. So for those customers, when we know that we reached practically everyone in Switzerland more than once, we probably reached them 5 times, then of course, if let's say TikTok comes in or another channel comes in, we use it as soon as it comes in, because we are hoping to find a new way to reach those customers. Or we hope that maybe on TikTok, we find customers that we cannot find on Facebook, or maybe we find customers that we cannot find on YouTube. But if you're acquiring, let's say, first 1,000 customers, and you know the market is huge in Switzerland, then probably don't need a complex strategy across 5 channels, and you can probably do well with just one. So sometimes people really overdo it. They try to over-engineer their marketing, and I think I would really think about the stage. Another way to also approach it is to think about B2B, B2C. Some channels are better for B2B or B2C. These lines are kind of blurred now. I mean, we can find really also nice businesses on Facebook these days. So, or we can also sell consumer products on LinkedIn. So depending on really the segment. So I'm not a huge fan of defining B2B, B2C, because I've been made kind of, not made foolish, but I think I've made a lot of mistakes thinking like this. So I don't think it makes a lot of sense to say, oh, Facebook is for older people and Instagram is for younger people. You find young people on Facebook and you find old people on Instagram. So let the algorithms do their job and find your audience. But this B2B, I think B2C is still sometimes, we hear that a lot. And I think this kind of selecting the right tools or trying to kill a fly with a sledgehammer, the analogy is basically, it's also not just about selecting the channels, but it's also about, let's say, running your analytics or any kind of other operations. So sometimes the problem is really small. And like with data, for example, some customers want to already from the beginning set up a huge BI system to track and measure everything. But then you look at the numbers and maybe they only have 50 or 100 customers. It really makes no sense to use this type of huge tools and think about, okay, maybe in 1 year I will need them. So I would really here just adjust the tools to the challenge, and also your resources to the challenge. And I think that concludes my presentation part. So I think we can move on. Hopefully there are some questions. I don't know how many people we have. I hope that was useful, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you so much, Luke. Thank you. So yes, please unmute yourself and pose your questions.
I have a question. What is actually the difference from this validation campaign to a pilot?
I guess pilot would be, I guess pilot would be if you already have a kind of a test customer, and we would do it typically with a larger company. So maybe if you're developing a more complex business software, and you identified 1 or 2 customers that want to use it, and then you run a pilot with them. But it's more, I would say, maybe a pilot for the project. But we also call pilot campaigns experimental campaigns when we want to test the audience. So I would say it's just a different name for running an experiment, in my opinion. But I could imagine a pilot campaign would be more in the market phase rather than the validation phase, because the validation phase, because the reason why you do a pilot, you want to save your budget. So you basically run a quick pilot and you say, okay, we don't know if Facebook will work in our audience. So you run a pilot on Facebook, and then after a week, you can decide if Facebook maybe, or after a month, you decide if Facebook is a good channel for you. And then you say, okay, we will scale now Facebook 10 times. Yeah, so that's how I understand the pilot. So yeah, I think it's completely different from the validation campaign in that respect.
Well, thank you.
Hello.
Hi.
Yes. Hi. Thank you for being here. It was very good for me to understand a little. But with Laura's question, I was a little bit confused now.
Okay. Maybe I didn't do a good
okay.
job explaining it. If you want, I can.
No,
I can
no.
it.
Actually, you've done it very. No, actually, I think you have. My idea is I have a product that I want to test. Shall I do a validation campaign first, or shall I go straight to the pilot campaign?
And how many customers already tested your product?
None.
Okay, so then you're definitely in the validation phase, right? Because
okay,
you might think, okay, my product is ready. Is it an app, or was it what is it? It's an app.
Yeah. It's a web app.
Okay,
it's not an app.
Yeah. So I would basically recruit from your own network, your friends or your LinkedIn, test customers and actually validate and think about assumptions. Like what does it mean? What does a success mean in your case? Does it mean that they register? Does it mean that they reach the kind of the wow effect in the app? And then you basically work with them and you do a validation campaign with them to basically make sure that the product is kind of good enough to start advertising with the general public and spending money on it. So I would be basically very afraid, maybe not afraid, because we're actually quite fearless about this, but I would say I would not recommend you spending your own money on marketing if you did not yet, tested the product with your family, your friends, and your colleagues. So I would do that properly and actually ask them, would you pay for it, or would you? And actually, I don't know the details, but I would really, first of all, identify what I want to learn and what criteria do I have to meet to start spending money on it.
Okay, and shall we do the breeding campaign since the beginning, since the validation stage campaign?
Which campaign?
What you said, the marketing briefing campaign.
I would say briefing comes later. So once you validated this, so once you kind of collected those learnings, maybe you can do a blog. Let's say you can do a post on your LinkedIn. You could say to people, okay, I'm launching this product and I'm looking for test customers, or just tell me, what do you think? These are the 2 things I want to learn. I want to know, would you pay for it? I'm just fantasizing now. I would say,
okay,
would you pay for it? And let's say, how much would you pay? Yeah.
Okay.
And then you post it, you tag, maybe you get 50 responses or no responses. That also tells you something, right? And then once you learned, and once you know, okay, people say this, maybe you need to change something in the product, then you document that in your briefing. And then once you kind of have a solid brief. You need to judge yourself, like, do I have all these elements defined? And if I do, then you're ready to go to somebody or marketing expert or agency, or sort of hire someone to say, okay, now I need a marketing strategy to take it to the market.
Okay, one question. There is already like a market validation for the idea, because there are companies already doing with a lot of success, and that means something for my project.
A good question. I think sure. I would look at those competitors. If they operate in the same country or the same region, are they? And then how do you kind of compete and differentiate? Because of course, if there is a strong validation from the market, then you probably, if your product is similar or even better, then maybe you can skip some of the validation part. But I would still try to test it with maybe run a smaller campaign. Maybe instead of doing in this case, my validation would be, instead of doing a free LinkedIn post, maybe I would run spend 200 francs on a Facebook campaign, for example, just to, again, do this validation phase, just to get this reality check. Is it really working? Because, and then use this information in your briefing. Otherwise, if you skip this and you say, if you would come to me and say, okay, I think this is great because this company does it, then we would probably still recommend you running a smaller campaign at the beginning, rather than just saying, okay, let's just go big immediately. So I think if you don't do it yourself, then you would probably have to do it anyway, because no one will really trust your word. Yeah. So I think if you have, let's say, limited resources and some knowledge, I would do it myself. If not, then maybe you can plan this kind of mini validation campaign for your product with a very small budget, just to prove the point that it actually is working well.
Okay, that was very good to hear. We plan to do that, and it's very important to choose the metrics, as I learned today. And in this early stage, wouldn't be the CPA then?
Right. I maybe you can tell me quickly in 30 seconds kind of what the product is. So
okay, we are service provider to connect. We are platform to connect patients to doctors virtually.
Okay. And what do you want users to do when they respond to your advertising, or like what would be the ideal outcome?
Well, I want them to book an appointment.
Okay.
Yes, and ultimately, I want them to pay for it.
Right. So probably they have to kind of respond to marketing. They have to then go to your landing page or go to the App Store, download the app, register with the app, and then book an appointment.
Actually, they don't have to do any of that, because we're not a product, we are a solution. So it's like they go straight to our to the platform, and they do it right there, when they need it. It's on-demand service.
Okay. So they have they have to provide some details, and they have to select a doctor, or
yes, yeah. Everything will be there for them. All right. Available.
So if there is no registration or like complex download, then maybe you could actually, your KPI one could be how many bookings you have, as you said.
Okay.
And maybe you could also have, I don't know the process, because but I think sometimes booking might not happen immediately. People might look at it and, let's say, save it and then do it later. So maybe you could think of another KPI. I don't know what is the process. Maybe there is a search function, or
there is.
Yeah. So maybe how many people use that search function is a good indicator also of engagement, and also gives you an indication, are we even sending the right people to the web page? And then if you do it with 1,000 people or 5,000 people, then okay, they're engaged, they search, but maybe they don't book, or maybe they search, they select the doctor, but they don't book. So you need to decide. I think it's better to tag and track as much as, maybe not everything, you don't over engineer it, but actually think there are maybe 3 stages or 4 stages, and tag first 2, 3 stages. Don't tag the whole thing, because there won't be probably that many conversions at the beginning, but maybe just tag the first couple stages, and then you can start saying, okay, people are interested, and we also had few bookings, so that means people are also prepared to do the whole process. So yeah.
Oh, that's great. I have another question. I'm very interested in this lunch and learn here. We are like a B2B2C, because we have users and we have doctors. And at the beginning, what I want, I won't have many doctors to offer. So probably I will reach the users first. And so shall I do a different campaigns for like both ends?
I mean, in your case, you need to think about what's more difficult. If you think that, in your case, probably if you have enough customers, you will find doctors, right? So
right, that's what I think.
Right? Yeah. So in those cases, I would test the stuff that is more challenging. So finding people who pay in the end will be more challenging than finding doctors.
Okay.
And I've seen this with crowd lending platform. We also have a campaign to find investors and find projects. And it's actually easier to find investors than projects. So most of the campaigns is focused on finding projects. So I would also just, basically look at the stuff that is more challenging and really focus on it. Because if you start like running 2 campaigns at the same time, you will be like, spending money in both places, tracking will be more complicated, everything will, so just basically drop one thing and just say, okay, we have enough doctors. And the worst case scenario, you will maybe disappoint a couple people, like they maybe not find enough slots, or maybe there won't be enough doctors, or maybe they don't like the ones that are on the platform. Or maybe you can create some fake profiles for doctors so that to make it look bigger. Yeah. But I think I would really just narrow down this challenge to end customers.
Okay, good. I thought so too. And by the way, what is your platform? The crowdsource?
We work. It's one of our customers. It's on our website. You can have a look. So it's a crowd lending platform for KMU in Switzerland.
Oh, great. I will check them. Thank you very much for all the insights and inputs.
Thanks, Claudia, for asking questions. Very good. And good luck with your venture. Thanks.
Thank you.
I would have another question, if I may. So firstly, thanks, Claudia, to your insight. It was also really helpful for myself. But then another question regarding, we spoke now about platforms, okay, and the validation of like online platforms or apps. But how do you actually go about physical products? Like when I start now a campaign, okay, and we want to distribute mass disinfection boxes, okay, a physical product. Would I then just like make a little teaser or a video, and then I will just make it the same as a platform? Like I just like invest in like some Facebook ads, Google ads, and LinkedIn advertisement or whatever, and then I track how much interest is there, like in maybe on like clicking on our website, or like maybe pre-orders, or how would you go on about this?
Sure. Cool. A good question as well, and I think it's something that we also dealt with a few times. So I would really look at those online touch points that are meaningful, because they have to do something to order, right? You're not just sending people like these packages to random people. So And what is it exactly? What is in this package? Can you quickly tell me?
So it would be a black box, and like the functionalities of that make sure that if you put your face mask in and put it into the sun, then the mask will get disinfected. Okay, so you would sell the box with 2 masks. That's the plan.
Oh, okay, I understand. Yeah, I mean it's a normal kind of sales process, because in the end we buy stuff online, and I think this type of product is a typical kind of e-commerce challenge to sell something that you pay for, basically a purchase. So in this case, I would just treat it as a normal, not an app, but I guess you will have an e-commerce solution where you can, order as a guest or order online after registration. So in your validation, you could, depends what you want to test, because let's say if you want to test the price, you could just run different landing pages, just even with different pricing. Or if you want to test messages, you also run campaigns with different messages. You could say, we want to see if, because you're actually tapping into maybe, people are definitely kind of, I don't really know, like maybe it could be a benefit because it's convenient, or maybe it's cheaper if you just disinfect, or maybe it's safer. Yeah. So depending on who your audience is, or make some assumptions about your audiences. Are we going to target kind of worried people or more older people, and then just start creating assets and creative assets that fit that audience. So you go from that angle. So of course, if you think it's about cost, because it's cheaper to buy this and disinfect, then you communicate the cost, and then you probably will also impact your audience, like who is worried about spending money. If it's more about really having a properly disinfected mask, then you're probably thinking about people are more aware of the issue. Maybe then the communication can be more technical about how the box works and how is it better than washing it yourself and so on. So I think it really, and that comes down, I think you have a more of a briefing challenge. And I think I would actually ask you, because probably you have those ideas already in your head. Yeah. So I would actually, tell you to try to summarize it on a couple pages of paper and the presentation, create a good briefing, and actually define audiences, define key messages, and define your assumptions or your hypothesis that you want to test. And then it should be clear to you, like, what is the right channel to test this.
That makes sense. I'm just struggling a bit because one group was, or the main target group would be actually people in extraordinary need, because we want to solution, for example, to third world countries who don't have access to resources to disinfect the mask. And so, I see this a bit problematic than actually channels like Facebook and LinkedIn. And so since these communities are maybe not connected.
Yeah, I mean, I would have to really specifically answer your question. I would have to look at the regions or countries and places that you want to target. But I think if in those cases, we sometimes also look at partnerships. So if you let's say validated the product, it's a good product and it works, then I would actually forget online ads and really look at partnering with, either it's you need a distribution. So you will need either shops or, petrol stations or, maybe SMS advertising and things like that. So I think there are definitely solutions for this. We also run a campaign once in Kenya, I think it was, targeting people with low access to banking, and it was incredibly successful. And we also use I think Facebook there, because like, for example, then I think there I know people buy Facebook SIM cards, right? So for them, internet is Facebook. So for example,
Yeah.
you sometimes are surprised by stuff like this. So I would really encourage you to really summarize your thinking and then start like going one by one and look at maybe the first market that you think is most lucrative, and just try to do it there, because it will probably take you like quite a bit of time to really understand like what works and what doesn't work, and then you will probably need to have different strategies for different markets.
Cool. Thanks for your feedback in that regard.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Any other questions? If not, I have two quick questions.
Sure.
My first question is, will it be possible for you to share with us an example for a marketing brief?
Yes, I mean now, or just send
No,
it
later.
later.
I will post it
Yeah,
in the
sure.
Slack channel for the participants.
I would have to kind of anonymize it,
Yes.
but I could find something that we did. Yeah,
that will be very interesting. And
actually, what I will do, Biljana,
Yes.
I will write blog, because every time I have a request like this, I try to also turn it to our benefit. So I will write a blog. It will encourage me to write a blog, and I will then link it to you, so you can then send it around to the team. Yeah.
That will be fantastic. Thank you so much. And my other question was, you were talking about using simple tools for low numbers of customers. So now, with regard to the simplicity of use, what kind of tools come to your mind?
Like basically your own network, for example. Just as an example. Yeah. So sometimes we have customers that look to acquire maybe 10, 20 businesses. It's B2B solution. And they really, first thing they think about is, let's run Facebook, let's run LinkedIn campaign, or let's run a complex Google campaign. And all they need to do is go to their LinkedIn and actually start writing to people and researching the market and finding. And I think that's a good example where, you know, people really think about the technology first, or advertising. They want to spend money because it's kind of easy, but actually it's much easier to maybe find someone in your network that has access to those companies and just do it this way. Also, in terms of complexity of marketing, if you have a product and let's say you have a website in 2 languages in Switzerland, typically it's very typical in Switzerland, we have English and German. You don't need to start with let's say English campaign first. You could start with your German campaign, or the other way around, but typically you get a bigger audience in German. So these are the ways you could really quickly, without a lot of complexity, achieve your goal. So I think that these are just basically common sense stuff, but it's surprising how uncommon common sense is sometimes. Yeah, and I think we really always try to simplify it, because normally, I mean, it's not at the early stages stuff is not difficult. I mean, it should not be that difficult, and most of the founders, you know, they're smart people with expertise in their domain, and they should be able to figure out what's needed, and also sometimes they're you know, maybe also serviced badly from some service providers, because if you go to, let's say, a traditional digital agency with a validation campaign, they will plan a huge campaign to acquire your 10 customers. And I think that's what also I was referring to, because that sometimes happens. I mean, you go to a marketing agency and they don't understand that you're just validating. They will just sell you something because they think you need it. And it doesn't need to be as expensive or as onerous at the beginning.
Thank you. This is just fantastic. Thank you so much for empowering common sense and bringing us back to basics. On that note, this is your last chance for questions. If you have another question, please unmute yourself. And I'm keeping my eye on the box to see no. So on behalf of all of us, on behalf of the Versus Virus Incubator, thank you so much, Luke. Thank you for being with us. Thank you for sharing with us your common sense, your knowledge, your expertise. It has been fantastic. And we will be expecting those blog posts.
Sure.
For the participants, I would like to bring to your attention something that you already hopefully know. Next Friday, we are going to have the midterm pitch. And the midterm pitch is going to happen exactly the same time, but a little bit longer. It is going to happen thanks to Vertly and the Founder Institute. The Founder Institute will be providing the jury, and Vertly will be providing, and Vertly is one of our projects here. They have a platform that will be hosting the pitch. And so please, you all have the link, click register, because we do want to know, we want to give you an advice in advance. When are you going to pitch? Just in case you don't have enough time on your hands and you want to show up, pitch, get the feedback and go. The pitch is not going to be open to the public. We want to provide a safe space for all of you to practice and learn. So once again, do register for the midterm pitch. Thank you so much, Luke.
Thank you. And, thank you for having me, and thanks for organizing this. It's a great initiative, and I wish you all luck with your ventures. It was a pleasure to be here.
Same here. Thank you, and good luck to everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.